First speaker is Serge Belongie, and he came to Denmark in 2021. He's actually been here quite a few times before, and he's professor at DIKU and director of the Pioneer Center for AI. And before that, he was associate dean and professor at Cornell. And he will tell us more about a research project within the Pioneer Center, and maybe we should tell a little bit about the Pioneer Center before that. But it's about searching for structure in unfalsifiable claims. So Serge.
Great. Thank you, Johannes. All right. As Jakob said, I'm the director of the relatively new Pioneer Center. I moved here about a year ago. And that picture in the background is the building where we will be located. It's currently under renovation. It's set to open in January. I picked a representative project that we're working on. We have a number of moonshots within the center, and I picked one that I think is emblematic of the kind of approach we want to take. The moonshots that the Pioneer Center will pursue are not the same as what you'd see at DeepMind, Google, Facebook, and so on, where they have infinite compute resources and gigantic teams of engineers. We're tapping into some unique strengths that you can find in the Danish academic system and ecosystem in general. And what you'll see in this moonshot and the other ones that the center pursues is that they have a very high-touch interaction between people and machines, humanities, social science, journalism, computer science, data science, and so on. The one topic that I picked here has to do with preventing the spread of misinformation, which normally you would associate with fact-checking, and somewhat paradoxically, that isn't the goal of this research. What we're focusing on in this moonshot is unfalsifiable information. It's the things that you can't verify. It's kind of the dark matter of social media discourse. So the things that can be handled by fact-checking should be handled by fact-checking. And DIKU actually has some fantastic groups that are doing that type of work. But we're looking at a different problem. So things like, okay, so that was payback. Pseudoscience, incorrect gut feelings, all those kinds of things that circulate online. So the term that we use here is a narrative. Narratives in literature are formally defined as things involving protagonist, antagonist, transformation, journey, and so forth. That actually isn't what we're talking about here. In a social media context, we're talking about the vulgar sense of the word narrative. It's often used as an accusation. You didn't say XYZ because it doesn't fit your narrative. Oh, I had a narrative? What was it? So this is in distinction to facts. So you can have a tweet that asserts some facts, and this could be run through a fact checker, and you could probably verify that these percentages are correct. But Paul, why are you saying this? You're not saying it to get us to check those numbers. It's because you have a narrative. So what are the narratives that are advanced? They could be things like, this thing of not allowing plastic straws is nonsense, it's theater. But you could imagine narratives in opposition that are saying, well, actually, your tweet left out some information about how plastic waste circulates globally. Okay? So in this project, we're not talking about right or wrong. We're talking about that part that's not explicitly present in the tweet or the Facebook comment. It's the intent, the motive. It's this dark knowledge that's hidden behind the tweet. And it's important that this not just be in English. This needs to be a global thing, and it also needs to be sensitive to the culture wherever this kind of narrative processing is happening. You can see on the right, this was after a pretty big soccer victory. I experienced it myself. I couldn't get home. The streets were blocked. And there was a soccer victory, and people celebrated it, and it blocked the buses. And so here's a tweet. It's not falsifiable, but it says that if these people had been a different religion or had a different skin color, that the response of the media and the public might have been different. All right, so this is someone tweeting something. The one on the left comes very close to saying that Black Lives Matter is a hate group, but doesn't quite say it. right? So you could parse it with modern natural language processing techniques. There's a lot of plausible deniability built into it. But as a machine learning researcher, I'd like to know, where does that piece of content situate itself in the space of narratives? If somebody shares that, I'm not talking down to the word or the letter, but what narratives is that advancing? As a computer vision person, I'm also interested in how visual signals portray narratives. Here's a billionaire celebrity couple divorce. And when it happened, all the news agencies pretty much had to run the same story. But they also had photo editors that needed to pick thumbnails to run with the story. And I can't help but notice that they picked thumbnails where the couple looks happy and functional, like everything's going to be okay. And I can assure you that not all celebrity divorces get the same treatment. In fact, right now, the narrative has changed for Bill Gates, and he isn't portrayed in this way. So some photo editor, could be a college intern, is the one that picked those pictures. What narrative were they telegraphing to the audience with those choices? There's also cases where people miscaption images. So here we have a US politician saying that a certain governmental policy is resulting in shelves being bare. But if your keen eye focuses on the currency, what do you notice? Although today it may actually be the same, but these are not dollars, right? So this photo and caption together was designed to advance a certain narrative. And when it was pointed out that that is a miscaptioned image, the narrative, at least locally in terms of what's advanced by that image, collapses. So, and I'm going very quick because we only have 15 minutes. The work where we decided to dig into this was done by the students shown here, and it's emblematic of these cross-campus collaborations that Jakob alluded to. So we have KU, DTU, and then a former student from Cornell. And we picked this very interesting problem just to get us started. Instead of talking about Palestine and Israel or racism and things like that, I picked something that I thought would be pretty innocuous, not partisan, yet something that people had strong opinions about. So suppose you go to a public restroom, you wash your hands, and you need to dry them, and you're presented with these options. You have paper towels, you have an air dryer. So I look at this and I just think it's obvious which one is superior. I mean, who am I kidding? I know which one I'm going to pick. I'm not going to say, because it's completely, I'm not an epidemiologist, I'm not a public health expert, but I definitely have opinions about which one I would pick. And I think most people here also have opinions. But why do you have that opinion? What's it based on? Is it based on facts that you're asserting, or is it a gut feeling and then you go searching for facts to back it up? It turns out I was wrong that this was an innocuous problem. There is big money behind this, and there are smear campaigns that are launched by local distributors and rumors going up to the big companies like Dyson and paper manufacturers that they're actually putting out these bot campaigns to smear each other's methods of hand drying. So I was wrong that there's not much at stake here. But nonetheless, you can poll people and you can find out what are the narratives behind this. And they basically break down into this sort of debate of air dryers are better than paper towels or vice versa. And if you harvest large amounts of tweets that mention hand dryers or paper towels, you're also going to find some irrelevant stuff. That's the purple category. And then some surprises, like people with long hair sometimes dry their hands in their hair, which we hadn't known about. And then again, on the visual side, there are memes that express certain narratives involving hand drying. And these are mostly just fun. But it's important that we recognize this as a multimodal phenomenon. So one of the things that makes this a moonshot is it's not just one conference paper or one journal article. This touches on so many areas of computer science and all other departments at KU, among others. So, and I'm just putting that up just out of humility to show that we're really just nibbling on a corner of a very big problem. So the technique that we tapped into is something called SNAP. And we first applied this to the problem of mapping out the space of taste. And in this machine learning study, the stimuli were visual. They were images of food. And what we wanted to get at was some kind of visual map where entities would be nearby each other if you had the impression that the taste would be similar, and they'd be far apart if the tastes were different. So we prepared this interface, and I'm going to skip the details, but it's basically a crowd labeling platform where you can present an anchor image and then have people click on images that they think taste more like the anchor than the other ones. And from there, you can collect a lot of so-called triplet data, and then you can train a machine learning system that tries to discover a so-called embedding. That concept embedding down here, that's something that's been around for a while. With this lower pipeline, never mind the human in the loop part, before we started doing this study, there were plenty of approaches that would do the heavy lifting of taking images, like images of food, extracting a 1,000-dimensional feature vector using deep learning techniques, and putting it into dimensionality reduction techniques to produce something like this embedding. And that would be essentially your visual menu in this case. So what we did was put in this other pathway. We have this combined cost function where a small percentage of the stimuli are actually sent to human annotators through the interface that I just showed. And the way to think about it is that the automatically produced concept embedding, you can actually pull on it. You can exert force on that embedding and actually tell it some surprising things, like mashed potatoes and vanilla ice cream. They look very similar in photos. Wasabi and guacamole, they look very similar. But if you show the pictures to human annotators, they can pick up on the contextual cues and they know they're different. So this thing that comes out of the deep learning pipeline is not so smart after all. And so you need humans to tip it off to some of these differences. And this was also applied in the case of music genre detection. And I won't show any details, but it's exactly the same concept. You present human annotators with names of bands in groups of 3, and you ask, does this band sound more like this one or this one? And you run it through the same framework. So we did the same thing with our narratives. And in this case, the entities are tweets. And it just has to do with essentially how much the anchor person would agree with the other tweets that are presented in this small gallery. So that was how we actually got at this little hierarchy. But the kind of thing that happens, if you imagine in the future there'll be dashboards. Let's say that we succeed at this narrative-based analysis, and then something goes viral on Twitter, and you want to understand what happened. The current state of the art would be that top left one, which is completely produced through deep learning-based pre-trained system. It's called a T5 sentence transformer. And it produces this embedding, and you have these tweets that are in that space. And just skip down to the bottom right. This is the one that we're producing. So it represents a warped version of the one at the top left. And quantitatively, I won't go over these numbers here, but the point is that we can measure this in terms of triplet agreement. How often did our system actually guess the correct, in those triplets, is A more like B than C? Does our human influence system do better? And numbers that are bigger here mean that it did better. So SNAC T5 is our approach. So the kind of thing you could do in this dashboard if you wanted to understand narratives is you just harvest a whole bunch of tweets, run it through the narrative-based embedding, produce this visualization where you can mouse over these dots, and each one corresponds to a tweet or a Facebook comment. And so you can look at these and say, oh, this one has to do with paper running out all the time, or this one has to do with COVID spreading from air dryers. So this kind of thing quantitatively got better when we had that human in the loop representation. So this is just the beginning of a moonshot. It was probably a 10-year kind of project. But as I said it in the title, this is about searching for structure in unfalsifiable claims. Generally, everything we're looking at is actually what's discarded at the very first step if you're doing fact-checking. And we're actually taking the opposite. we want to look at how that space is structured. So I'm going to wrap up there. I'm just going to leave the key questions up here, and then maybe have time for one question. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes, we have time for a question. Right. I have one question. If someone wants to contribute or be part of it or learn more about this, what should they do? How could they interact with the Pioneer Center?
Yeah, so I would say we have this QR code that goes directly to the to this paper, and then we have a Twitter account and also LinkedIn, so you can follow us there. There's the Twitter account, and you can also just email me directly.
Yes, thank you very much, Serge. Really, really interesting.